shots that this guy knows how to hit.
Tracy Harwood. So I've done a little bit of digging around and I've discovered
Ricky Grove. Fog comes in on little cat feet.
Phil Rice. This is the best film that I've seen all year and maybe ever.
Damien Valentine. Use the machinima, Luke.
Welcome to week 2 of And Now for Something Completely Machinima.com. I'm Ricky Grove, here to introduce a new film that Phil chose. Thanks for joining us. Phil Rice, Tracy Harwood, Damien Valentine are here to talk with me today. Now, Phil's pick is a very interesting one because it's a trilogy of films that was sort of stopped in the middle because I think he could have done more. That came out back during the heyday of machinima by a guy named Todd Stallkamp. And I remember when they first came out, it created a stir because it's shot in Sims. And it was one of the first example of Sims machinima that could be serious, dark, and even brutal. The idea of brutality in The Sims is just beyond comprehension, but that's what people were doing in the heyday of machinima, is they were taking things and turning them upside down. I'm really happy that you picked this. Phil upscaled the 3 videos to make them better quality. But here, why don't you introduce the film to us, Phil?
Yeah, so this was at, one of the kind of peaks of a lot of great content that was starting to emerge from machinima, generally speaking. And The Sims was really, The Sims 2 was the version of the game then, and it was really kind of making a mark. And so I caught this film. I can't remember how I learned of its release. But I caught the original version of this film, the first chapter of this, called The Fixer. I think Todd was still using a filmmaker label of Burnt Coffee Productions, and at other times it was T.F. Stallkamp instead of Todd. But I watched this film and was just mesmerized. I think what most caught my attention, other than that, that kind of strange juxtaposition of this brutal, assassin story, essentially, over the landscape of The Sims, which just wasn't being thought of in that way, generally. That caught my attention, but what really caught my attention was the writing. The writing and the delivery by Todd himself of the narrator, a character named Ernest Rent. And I just was stunned. The style of the narration and the writing underneath that, it kind of strummed the same chord as like maybe, I don't know, James Salas, the author of Drive, which was later made into a movie. No Country for Old Men, Cormac McCarthy, to a degree. It had that same level of dark to it, this willingness to let its lead character be not even really an anti-hero. Like, there was nothing really here. This was a bad dude, not completely amoral, as you'll learn later in the story, but definitely has a different set of values than what is traditionally embraced. The very, very recent David Fincher movie, The Killer.
Oh yeah,
if you haven't seen it, the vibe you get off of that character, that he's just not playing by the same moral rules that hold society together, that's Ernest Rent to a degree. But Ernest Rent has a sense of humor. He has a wry wit. He has a way of saying things that is not the normal way of saying things. There's a poetry to his way of describing things that might otherwise be banal. So, just intriguing. In the opening, in the second act of this first chapter, we see the naked backside of this character, and it's like, this is The Sims.
Yeah.
Just and the thing is Todd didn't make it about that, about being shocking or whatever, but it was just kind of an early way in the series to just set the tone that, hey, I'm going to make the film that I want to, period. I'm not going to abide by what The Sims says is proper or whatever. It's rather remarkable and noteworthy, by the way, that Todd ended up going to work for EA, and specifically on The Sims. And what's interesting about that, and actually Tracy will tell us a little bit more later this episode, but it'll be interesting to maybe ask Todd about this, because I've never been 100% clear on whether, I have to feel like that the filmmaking in these was responsible for helping get him the attention.
I think it was.
But the content is not something that The Sims people would have wanted to put out there with the Sims label. So there must have been kind of a strange dynamic there where,
yeah,
we like what you're doing, but
no more bare asses. Yeah.
Right. So I have to think, in addition to the fact that we've seen from everybody that went from kind of a freelancer machinima maker like Todd was, who go on to work in the gaming industry. One of the things that was inevitably the case with every single one of them was they stopped making amateur machinima altogether. Some of that is just the effect of when making this stuff becomes your career, it's what you're spending most of your day doing anyway, and probably the last thing you want to do is come home and do more of that.
Right.
But in the case of the Fixer series in particular, I have to also think he wouldn't have been able to do that and not risk upsetting his employer, and maybe rightfully so. I mean, they've got a right to want to market their game in the way that they want to, and I get it.
There may also have been an issue where any content they create while being an employee is owned by the company.
Oh yeah, that too. That's a great point. Yeah, that is a copyright thing. Work for hire is the employer owns it. Yeah. Some of my thoughts and theories on that, of course, are informed by my own experience making a piece of rather popular Sims 2 content. That when it came time to, use that in a commercial environment, so to speak, get it on TV, for example. The no that we received was pretty clearly because of the irreverence of some of the content in the film. And, this one takes it even further. I mean, I guess I depicted murders in mine too, didn't I? But this is a little bit different. So now how I got involved, I ended up becoming, and Ricky as well, we ended up becoming involved with the series as it went on, like in the actual production. And how that came about was I reached out to Todd when I saw the first episode and basically just said, first of all, I love the film. It's amazing. And I hope you're going to make more of these. Just sincere praise, but also kind of expressed to him my concern or my caution, because the original version of the film had recognizable copyrighted music. The opening scene was actually the song Sway by Dean Martin, which is wonderful, and it fit the scene wonderfully, and it's a great song. But my concern was, you're going to be limited. This is to me, this was clearly potential festival material. But if you've got that copyrighted song in there, it's going to be it's a non-starter. And so there was a little bit of interaction with this and stuff. And he's like, well, what do you suggest I do? I was like, well, I'd be glad to rescore this for you. Now, not actually writing the music, but, saying we could find, Magnatune, their whole catalog right now is Creative Commons. We could find stuff that's appropriate and make it work for this. And he was kind of like,
Right.
I don't know, man. I love the way that song, there was a particular mood that I wanted, and that song captures it. And he wasn't gung ho about it. I think he would say so too. But I said, well, let me give it a try. And so I did, and I rescored it using selections from all Creative Commons selections from Magnatune, and he ended up really liking it. I don't think he liked it as much as the original because, there was something that song really, I think, was part of the formation of the whole idea for him. Yeah, it's wonderful. But we ended up doing it that way, and now, the funny thing is, I don't know that he ever ended up submitting it to any festivals. He did produce a second chapter, which he selected his own music for that. And then the third chapter, he let me be his kind of music supervisor again. And I even composed a very short piece of incidental music for a scene that we couldn't find something else for. The scene where Ernest is getting beat up. It's kind of a Nine Inch Nails sounding industrial, weird little thing. And he had me do all the sound on, I don't remember if I did sound on the first one or not, but I definitely did all the sound on the third one. And Ricky was a major voice contributor to that. One of my favorite characters that I've ever heard Ricky do. So yeah, it's, I feel, because of that, I feel a little weird putting this up there because I don't really like to use this show as a vehicle to toot my own work or, to call attention to my own work. But this would have been great without me involved. I do think that I helped elevate it a bit, but the thing that's great about this is the writing and the character that Todd created, the way that he executes the narration. I would give my left arm to be able to go back in time and send Todd a really good microphone, because that's the only thing it was lacking. He didn't have one. So the sound quality of his narration wasn't what he would want it to be, but the performance of it was just so perfect. And this is some of my favorite machinima. Like this is like, if I wasn't so kind of focused on creating comedy, this is the kind of stuff I would want to produce. Like it's smart. It's daring, very entertaining, finds a way to be funny, even though it is so brutal and cold. But there are moments that you can't help but chuckle, and they're deliberate. They're not, we're not laughing at him. We're laughing with him. It's just wonderful, wonderfully done. And it is, it's a heartbreak similar to like a breakup. The fact that he was not able to continue making this. I completely understand why. I don't think that his decision not to continue it was at all unreasonable. But this story was so good, and I don't know how much more of it there was to tell. Maybe not a whole lot more. Maybe one more chapter could have wrapped this up. And maybe someday he'll either do it or he'll let me.
There you go.
God. Hint.
Supervising producer.
I would do it.
Todd Skullcap.
He would have to return to do voice again. But anyway, I love this series. And yeah, when we were restoring all the Machinaplex content, I couldn't not upscale and preserve this going forward too, because it's one that it's a series that deserves to be remembered. It's very memorable. If you've seen it, so I probably don't need to ask you guys what you think, but I'd love to hear what your comments are.
Shall I go first? Because I've got a little bit of backstory as well. I'll share.
Sure.
That might sort of you might it might stimulate some memories for you, perhaps. I'll tell you the first thing that caught me was the titles of these. Fixer episode 1, Fat Men Run. Episode 2, Guns, Gandhi, and Getting Some. And chapter 3, different to the episodes, One Digit Off. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant titles. Obviously, the first thing I noticed, quite apart from Todd's name on it, was that Phil, you'd worked on all 3. And Ricky, you were in the last as the Greek kingpin, Caspar Rory. What a great name.
Yeah.
And the first episode of this was actually released originally, I believe, in around March 2006. Okay, so this has a 50s film noir style to it from my point of view. And it's mixed, really. And I think it's mixed with a Guy Ritchie pastiche. And it's also narrated in a kind of Brad Pittish style, monotonic sort of voice style, which I thought was another really kind of interesting aspect to it. It was seemingly inspired by Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and obviously made in Sims 2. And there are scenes in it with shots of kind of bloody bodies, but you don't see any violence, and I think really that's the selection of Sims to show to do that and to show that and to portray the humor of that was really quite inspired. The humor itself is really dry and draws heavily on, I think, Ritchie, but probably also Tarantino. It's violent. The themes are definitely adult. There's crime, prostitution, murder, revenge killings, and all that sort of stuff in it. And it's evidently focused on this gunman for hire, this guy who goes by the name of Ernest Rent, which is an absolutely beautiful, dry, humorous kind of name, and you'll see why when you go through each of the 3 episodes. Of those 3 episodes, I think probably the second one was the most rounded when I was watching it. They don't seem to make a lot of sense as standalone films, so you really need to be prepared to watch all 3.
But they're very short.
They are very short, but I think you need to watch them as a complete thing. The first one basically sets the scene. The second one kind of expands the plot and the characters, and the third one is more kind of classically acted out and closes out of a few of those kind of character arcs, really. The approach is a little different in the third one, I think, which is that it's primarily voice acted throughout, whereas the other 2 are narrated. And when I was watching these, I wasn't sure if episode 3 was indeed where it was intended to end, and my guess was probably not. And basically, I then did a little digging around, and I can tell you that actually there was intended to be another episode, a 4th episode, but that was never made, and I will tell you why from what I've dug out in a little while. I thought overall it was a fairly complex plot. Actually, it's quite dark and quite complex, and it's complex because there are a lot of characters, and in places it's kind of a little hard to follow them all and to follow how they all interrelate, because they do seem to interrelate. But actually, I think that is also part of its charm. It's the kind of the richness of the plot that makes it stand out, along with, I think, the sound design, the editing, and the music selection. All of those stood out amazingly to me. But the other thing that made it stand out for me was all the various cultural and artifact references that are kind of littered throughout it, which really add great depth to the story. And I'll give you some examples. The telephoto lens, which gave a sense of who the central character actually is. The rain representing London. The CD representing some kind of deep information-based goings-on. The sound of the car engine, which is definitely a kind of super sports car. And that's definitely the sort of car that a sociopath would drive. And for that matter, I suppose, how else would a sociopath sound if it wasn't monotonic? So those were things that really, they just added that kind of the layers to it were really very interesting. I thought the sex in reference to this kind of morally bankrupt person and criminality, the newspaper clippings giving hints of what's going on, and of course the use of the guns, although you don't ever really see them being used in a massively violent way. I mean, all of that was just brilliantly done. I thought there were a couple of cliffhangers, and one I'll mention. I wasn't fully sure I got it, but there was a baby scan shot, for example, that obviously perhaps would have closed out in the final episode, which probably added yet another layer to this character had it have gone that far. I think the animation itself looks quite dated at this point, even though I think you've done an absolutely sterling job restoring it, Phil.
Yes.
I do think what it has is a very distinctive style, which, irrespective of the quality of the animation, actually comes through really strongly. It's probably the most recent film that I've seen with this kind of sorry, I'll say that again. I think the most recent film that I've seen with this kind of style is actually the Sharon Tate story. What was it called? Once Upon a Time.
The Tarantino one?
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time.
That has got very similar sort of style.
I can see
to it. Obviously, this isn't exactly the same, but I think there's a lineage there. And it's quite amazing to think that it was pulled off in Sims. I was also super interested to see some of the early machinima community working on this, alongside both of you, of course. And one of the names that jumped out at me was Trace Sanderson, otherwise known as Lainey Voom, whose work, if you remember, we mostly recognised with that film Push, made in Second Life, I think. And she was the airport announcer in the third part of this.
I forgot about that. That's right.
And then some of the sets in the game that others had contributed were also being used. So I saw Britannica Dreams mentioned, so that Michelle being best known for making the Snow Witch. And also Ken Thane was mentioned, and he was otherwise known as 3D filmmaker at the time. And he was another one that went to EA Games during that sort of that period of time. I also noticed that this series had been picked up by festivals. And it was picked up in the 2006 Community Festival, the Machinima Academy festival that you guys were running. It was also picked up in Germany with the Bit Film Festival that year, and it also featured on Independent Film Channel's Media Lab site. And that was set up in 2005 to recognise and celebrate the work of independent filmmakers, such as those who were creating machinima at the time. And it featured on there, I think, in about the August.
That's cool.
In fact, it won the Best Series Mackie. And it was in competition at the time to the Ill Clan's Trash Talk, to Chris Burke's This Spartan Life, to Rooster Teeth's Red versus Blue, and also Hugh's Bloodspell series. It won that year, 2006. And I don't know if you guys remember that, but you should.
Yeah, we were there.
You were there.
We were there with
Todd. We were all there,
Yeah.
actually. We were all there.
Yeah, he got misty-eyed.
I'll bet he did. I'll bet he did.
It was a great moment.
I can absolutely imagine that. But let me share with you my little bit of digging around about Todd, because he's clearly got some directing chops. Obviously, he first found Sims whilst he was still in school. A lot of folks did. And from what I understand, he became really fascinated in how people loved creating stories with it. And the Fixer series is one of the things he made, just reflecting on how powerful it could be to do that, to tell great stories. There was indeed an episode 4 slated, and it was going to be called Barking Irons. But it was just never released, simply because he was struggling to find the time to make the content alongside the day job. Now, there was also going to be a Christmas special that year, 2006, but that also never got made. And quite frankly, he laments this, not being able to make these on his blog in December that year. And even though he'd gotten really excited with the Mackie Award, which kind of given him this great boost to try and, push him to finish it, he just never really got around doing it. 2 months after that, which was about a year after the episode 1 was released, he'd started working at EA Games, which is about February 2007. And he started working as a video specialist, which he also announced to the machinima community at the time. And then eventually he moved on to post-production and then creative direction. And he's still there. He's now the group creative director at EA Games, responsible for The Sims. Way back in 2007, when he just started working for EA, he recorded a little bit to camera for EA about his passion for machinima. And I'll share a link on the blog post so that you can see what he says about that.
Okay.
And he made a few other machinimas, I think probably for EA Games, where he's basically promoting the game and the various kind of expansion packs. Just before he started working there, though, the reason that 4th episode never actually got made was because he'd been commissioned, along with Trace Sanderson, to work on a broadcast production for a UK-based news program. And I managed to find a link to that too, or at least the first part of it. I'll see if I can dig around and find the second part of it. It's bound to be on YouTube somewhere. And apparently, as I understand it, it went on to win some awards, including a Media Innovation Award in 2007. Although I actually can't find anything out about that to verify whether or not that's actually true. So, Todd, over to you on that. I'm sure you'll be able to tell us. At the time, he attributed his move to EA primarily to machinima and to the community, and much like a number of others at the time, including Ken and Paul Marino, who was behind AMAS, the Academy of Machinima Arts and Sciences, the head of the team that ran the Machinima Film Festival. He basically said that his success was all due to Phil, your mention on the Overcast podcast, a recommendation by 3D filmmaker, that's Ken, producing an ad for Sims 2 being featured on the IFC's Media Lab site, the Mackie, and the UK TV show, all of which put him on the path to where he ended up. So there you go, Todd Stallkamp, Machinima Class of 2006. I think this is an absolutely fantastic story. I was, really, really, really enjoyed sort of researching this one. And as I said to you before we switched on, I managed to make contact with Todd, as I was writing this up, and I'm really looking forward to having a chance to have a catch up and an interview, and you guys working on that as well. So there you go. That's all I've got to say about this one.
You mentioned he used this. One of the reasons he wanted to use The Sims 2 was because he wanted to show how powerful the tool was. I was thinking that must be something like that, because you'd think a game like Grand Theft Auto would be more ideally suited for this kind of story. So obviously there's lots of mods involved with The Sims, to get the gun and stuff like that in. And I always enjoy watching machinima made with a game where they tell a story or do something that the game's not designed for. And this is a really good example of that. Because obviously that you don't have guns and stuff like that in The Sims. I do believe in one of the later games they do like a crime career choice. I don't know too much about it, but I was wondering if that was inspired by these films. Obviously, it doesn't get quite as brutal as what's shown here. It'd be more for more of the comedy side of things. But I did have a little bit of a wonder, was that the inspiration? But yeah,
One thing that I'll add to that, Damien, that the reason that he didn't choose GTA was GTA 4 didn't get released until 2 years after this film was made.
Yeah, that's
that
right.
would explain it.
Yeah,
I don't follow the
GTA 3
games that closely.
GTA 3 didn't have any of the stuff that made 4 and 5 such great opportunities for machinima. Yeah.
I don't follow those games that closely, but yeah. Okay, so that covers that. But I was also looking at the environments, which Tracy you covered as well. It's donated by members of the community. And there was one where you look in the background, and they've used the wall placement um, tool to create buildings like skyscrapers. And obviously, they're not really that far in the distance, but they've been textured, obviously, with custom um, imported textures to look like windows. So they look really small in the distance, but it's just the way that they're framed. But really, they're actually just behind. I think things like
Right.
that are really clever. And you can only do something like in a game like The Sims, where you have the tools provided to build things and then bring in your own content to decorate them. And again, that's another thing I admire is sort of how you want to achieve an effect. So you think about how to do it, and then you do it, and then it just looks great. And yeah, it does look dated, but the effect still works. Um, and I always appreciate stuff like that with machinima because with something like iClone, you can create that whole street in the background if you wanted to. Um, it's probably not really necessary, but you got the option. But when you got a game like The Sims, you can't create that, so you have to figure out tricks to achieve the same effect. And in a lot of ways, that offers more creativity or forces you to be more creative in thinking about how to get around those limitations of the game that you've chosen. And this is there are a lot of limitations with The Sims, which we discussed before, like characters acting silly and um, how hard it is to get them to exactly what you want. And he spent a lot of time working on this to get exactly the shots he wanted and bring in the mods. Obviously, there's the nudity, so he has to find a way to remove the censored, the pixelated filter that The Sims automatically puts over any character that undresses. So have to find a mod for that. It shows a lot of time and effort went to this. So I am sad that we didn't get to see four, but I can also understand why he didn't do it and why what a huge amount of time it would take to do it and why he never was able to find it, which is sad, but also I can appreciate it because he was working at EA. But yeah, these are excellent picks, and I actually hadn't seen the third one. I remember the first and second, so this is the first time I've seen the third one as well. So that was a nice little surprise. Yeah, that's all I got to say. I'm just very impressed by anyone who works
Yeah.
around the limitations of a game and does something fantastic with it.
Well, there's so many things I want to say about this, but I'll try to keep it short so we don't go on and on.
Mhm.
The first thing I want to talk about is style. One of the things this film is a triumph of style. If he had shot it in Grand Theft Auto, it would not be the same film because it would be too realistic.
That's true.
His goal is not realism. His goal is a style that fits the story. And that's what makes it so effective. The idea of these sort of simple, almost cartoonish kind of characters, him murdering this woman in cold blood in the first episode with blood coming up for her would not be the same as if it was in Grand Theft Auto. It just wouldn't. And I think style is something that is often neglected in not only a machinima, but in mainstream live action film as well, because they're trying so hard to be realistic, and I think the tradition that this film is part of, which I don't think noir is the right call because the lighting, noir, you have to have chiaroscuro lighting in order for noir to be effective. And there isn't that. There's a couple of times, but that's not that. It's a crime drama. It's a hard-boiled crime drama. Now, what's interesting is that type of film, that type of short film, that type of feature-length film has been going on since the 40s. And there have been filmmakers know that style. The fact that Todd Stallkamp in machinima, in a game called The Sims, managed to make an original contribution to crime drama is an extraordinary achievement.
Yes.
I mean, literally, it's extraordinary. To do something new in such a well-trod genre is just amazing. And you're right, the writing is incredible. One point comes to mind. Part of what's great about crime drama, hardboiled crime drama, is there's oftentimes the dialogue is suggestive as opposed to literal, meaning that what they say is not necessarily what you think it is. There's more to it. So the lead character, Ernest, is being beaten up in the third episode, and the character that I portrayed, the Greek tycoon guy, is sort of gloating over it. And all Ernest Rent says to him is fee, fi, fo. Now, in a dozen, in 3 dozen, in 20 dozen films, they would say, no, he's got to really say something more significant than that. No. Todd knew what he was trying to do.
Yes.
He knew who his character was. And that suggestion is so threatening and so right for hard-boiled drama. I can't tell you. It's just fantastic. The writing is the big accomplishment in this. I also think, and this is my last comments before I get too loquacious, that I think the films get better. The production values get better. And I think part of it is I think he gets better at making the film for each episode. And the reason why there's so much drama so much voice acting in the third one is because voiceover narration is kind of a simplification. It solves a lot of problems in telling a story because you have a narrator, a third-person narrator, who can just tell you, he felt this way, they did this, they did that. Well, I think he finally got to be comfortable enough to be able to get into the real meat of the dialogue in the third version. That's why there's so much dialogue in it. I thoroughly enjoyed doing the character. I think I remember Todd telling me to play it low key, and he gave me permission to do some ad libs. So I did a few ad libs in it. And I think that's one reason why my performance is good, is because it fits perfectly in with that low key style. He is a lead character, has this sort of world weary attitude that is often found in private eye characters, but instead it's in the main sociopathic villain, which is another creative aspect to it. I think the series was so well made and so well shot that you could take this series, make it live action, use all of the shots that Todd made, and put it on Amazon Prime as a series, and it would play like gangbusters. He's so skilled. He could have segued into professional television production with this film if he had the right contacts. Obviously, the world gives you certain cards and you play them. The card that he was given was go to EA and work with them. That was a smart thing to do. But in another world, if he had had a contact, he could be doing pro television production right now. And if you're talking about a remake film, I'm wondering whether it might be interesting to do it in Unreal. Just a thought. Well, here's to you, Todd. Fantastic series. I love it. One of my all-time favorites. And thank you for choosing it, Phil.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our episode today. I hope you liked it. We sure did. Send us your comments at talk@completelymachinima.com and go to our website, completelymachinima.com, for the show notes. I believe we're going to be doing an interview with Todd, right, Tracy?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yep. So that's coming up shortly. Thank you all for watching. Thanks, Damien, Phil, Tracy, for your comments. And thank you, Todd Stallkamp, for creating such a wonderful series. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.